I never expected to find evidence of architectural sophistication hiding beneath the streets I walked every day. Sidewalks, crosswalks, storm drains, they were just there, functional, part of the urban landscape. Modern infrastructure, nothing more. That changed the morning I watched city workers excavate a water main break on 5th Street and realized what I was seeing didn't match what I'd been told about urban development. The crew had dug down approximately 4 meters when they hit something unexpected. Not another utility line, not bedrock, not the typical layers of compacted fill you'd expect beneath a modern street. They'd uncovered the top of what appeared to be an ornate stone archway. Carved stonework with geometric patterns extending beyond the edges of their excavation. The foreman called it unusual foundation work from an old building, probably 19th century construction. Standard procedure was to work around it and move on. But standing there watching them carefully expose more of the structure, I couldn't shake a simple question. Why would someone build decorative architecture 4 meters underground? That question led me down a path I wasn't prepared for, because once you start asking why elaborate stonework exists beneath modern street level, you begin noticing patterns that don't fit the narrative we've been given about urban development. Patterns that suggest our cities might be built on top of something far more sophisticated than we've been told. The official story of urban growth is straightforward. Cities expanded gradually over centuries. Old buildings were demolished, new ones constructed. Streets were raised occasionally for drainage or infrastructure improvements. Simple, logical, documented progression from medieval settlements to modern metropolises. But the physical evidence beneath our feet tells a different story. A story about architectural capabilities that seem to exceed what we're told existed during specific historical periods. I started documenting these excavations whenever I encountered them. Construction sites, utility repairs, subway expansions. Anytime the ground opened up deep enough to reveal what lay beneath the surface layer. What I found was unsettling. Across different neighborhoods, different decades of construction, different geological conditions, the same anomalies appeared with disturbing consistency. Elaborate stonework buried at depths that shouldn't be possible through gradual urban development. Not simple foundations, not basic structural elements, but decorative architecture. Carved reliefs, ornamental columns, vaulted ceilings extending beneath street level. The kind of sophisticated stonework that requires advanced tools, mathematical precision, artistic skill that we associate with major civic buildings or religious structures. Yet here it was, buried beneath ordinary residential blocks, commercial districts, areas that supposedly developed organically over time without central planning. The depth was the first clue that something didn't add up. 4 meters of soil and debris covering elaborate architecture means either these structures are much older than their supposed construction dates, or something deposited massive amounts of material across entire urban areas in a relatively short period. The gradual accumulation explanation breaks down when you examine the mathematics. 4 meters of sediment buildup requires either catastrophic flooding, massive earthworks, or timescales that don't match documented urban development. But it wasn't just the burial depth that troubled me. It was the sophistication of what lay beneath. Modern construction follows predictable patterns. You excavate to bedrock, pour concrete foundations, build upward using standardized materials and techniques. Simple, efficient, cost-effective. What I was seeing suggested a completely different approach. Foundations that extended far deeper than structural necessity required. Stone-cutting precision that seemed excessive for underground work no one would see. Architectural elements that served no practical function but demonstrated remarkable craftsmanship. I found carved stone blocks fitted with tolerances measured in millimeters. Not roughly shaped stones held together with mortar, but precisely cut pieces designed to interlock without gaps. The kind of precision that requires sophisticated tools, measurement systems, quality control that we associate with major architectural projects. Yet these weren't major projects. These were foundations, utility tunnels, underground chambers that supposedly supported ordinary buildings in unremarkable neighborhoods. The stonework itself raised questions about capability and chronology. hand-carved relief work that would take skilled artisans months to complete, buried beneath structures supposedly built during periods when such craftsmanship was rare and expensive, geometric patterns that demonstrate mathematical understanding of proportion, symmetry, architectural principles that suggest formal training, institutional knowledge, organized craft traditions. All of this supposedly executed during historical periods when we're told such capabilities were limited, localized, available only for major civic or religious commissions. The most disturbing discovery came when I started mapping these findings across different areas of the city. What should have been random distribution, isolated examples of buried architecture scattered throughout urban development, instead showed clear patterns. Geometric layouts that suggested coordinated planning across vast areas. Underground chambers connected by tunnel networks that followed mathematical principles. Architectural elements that shared design characteristics despite supposedly being built by different contractors during different time periods. This coordination problem becomes impossible to ignore when you examine the evidence systematically. These weren't independent construction projects that happened to share similar techniques. The stonework demonstrates identical cutting methods, matching dimensional standards, coordinated aesthetic principles that suggest centralized planning, shared technical knowledge, organizational capacity that supposedly didn't exist during the documented construction periods. I began researching historical records, looking for documentation that might explain the sophisticated underground architecture I was observing. Building permits, architectural drawings, construction contracts, anything that might shed light on who built these elaborate foundations and why. The records were surprisingly thin. What survived were basic property transactions, simple building descriptions, routine administrative documents that treated these structures as ordinary residential or commercial development. But detailed architectural documentation, engineering specifications, contractor records that would explain the sophisticated stonework, the precise cutting techniques, the coordinated planning across multiple sites, those were conspicuously absent, as if the most technically challenging aspects of construction were somehow not worth documenting, as if the elaborate underground architecture I was finding was either so commonplace it didn't merit mention, or so unusual it was deliberately omitted from official records. The silence in documentation patterns matched what I was seeing in the physical evidence. Sophisticated capabilities that appeared suddenly, functioned for a period, then vanished from subsequent construction projects. Building techniques that produced remarkable results during specific decades, then were apparently forgotten or abandoned. Knowledge systems that enabled precision stonework, mathematical layouts, coordinated planning, that seemed to disappear from the documented record without explanation. This discontinuity becomes more pronounced when you compare the buried architecture with later construction built directly on top of it. The contrast is stark. The underground stonework shows mathematical precision, artistic sophistication, engineering capabilities that exceed what appears in the visible structures above, as if the later builders were working with different tools, different knowledge systems, different organizational capacity than whoever created the elaborate foundations they built upon. The implications of this evidence pattern are troubling. Either our understanding of historical construction capabilities is incomplete, or the architectural sophistication I was documenting represents something we've been taught to overlook. Something that existed, functioned at a remarkable level, then was buried both literally and figuratively beneath the narrative of gradual urban development we've accepted without question. Standing in that excavation on 5th Street, watching workers carefully expose carved stonework that shouldn't exist 4 meters beneath a modern sidewalk, I realized I was looking at evidence of capabilities that don't fit the timeline. Evidence that suggests our cities might be built on foundations far more sophisticated than the structures we can see. Evidence that points toward architectural knowledge, organizational capacity, construction techniques that operated at a level we're told didn't exist during the supposed construction periods. The question isn't whether this buried architecture exists. The physical evidence is undeniable. The question is why we've been encouraged not to see it, not to ask questions about its implications, not to investigate the discontinuities it reveals in our understanding of urban development and historical construction capabilities. The deeper I investigated, the more the pattern expanded beyond individual excavation sites. What started as curiosity about ornate stonework beneath one street became a systematic examination of underground architecture across the entire metropolitan area. And what I discovered challenged everything I thought I understood about how cities develop, who built them, and when. I began accessing municipal records, construction databases, utility maps, anything that might document what lay beneath street level. The official infrastructure maps showed the expected networks: water mains installed in the 1920s, electrical conduits from the 1940s, fiber optic cables from recent decades, standard urban development, layer upon layer of modern utilities. But these maps consistently failed to account for the elaborate stone chambers, tunnel networks, and architectural elements that construction crews encountered during excavations. The discrepancies weren't occasional oversights. They were systematic gaps. Official documentation that treated sophisticated underground architecture as if it simply didn't exist. Survey reports that described foundation work in the vaguest possible terms. Engineering assessments that mentioned unusual structural elements without providing detailed measurements, photographs, or technical specifications. As if there was an institutional reluctance to document what was actually being discovered. I started interviewing construction workers, utility crews, subway engineers, anyone who spent time excavating beneath city streets. Their accounts were remarkably consistent and deeply unsettling. Veterans with decades of experience described discovering chambers with vaulted ceilings, precisely fitted stonework, architectural details that seemed far too elaborate for their supposed purpose. But when they reported these findings to supervisors, they were told to work around them and move on. No investigation, no documentation, no attempts to understand what they'd uncovered. One electrical contractor described discovering a tunnel system while installing underground cables near the financial district. Not rough excavation, not simple utility passages, but finished architecture with stone arches, decorative elements, engineering sophistication that exceeded anything he'd seen in 40 years of construction work. The tunnel extended beyond his work area in both directions, suggesting a network far larger than his small section revealed. When he asked permission to explore further to map the extent of what he'd found, he was told it was outside the scope of his contract. Fill it in and finish the job. The pattern repeated with disturbing consistency across different neighborhoods, different time periods, different types of excavation work. Sophisticated underground architecture discovered, briefly exposed, then covered up and forgotten. As if the purpose wasn't to understand what lay beneath the city, but to ensure it remained hidden. I found similar accounts in newspaper archives, brief mentions in local publications from past decades. Construction crews discovering unusual foundations, workers finding elaborate stonework during routine excavations, engineers encountering architectural elements that didn't match project specifications. But these stories never received follow-up coverage. No investigations into historical significance, no attempts to understand the implications of what was being discovered. Just brief mentions that disappeared from public discourse as quickly as they appeared. The timing of these discoveries revealed another troubling pattern. Many of the most significant findings occurred during major urban renewal projects in the mid-20th century. Highway construction, urban redevelopment, large-scale infrastructure improvements that required deep excavation across wide areas. Projects that provided unprecedented access to what lay beneath established neighborhoods. And rather than celebrate these discoveries as evidence of the city's architectural heritage, authorities seemed intent on minimizing their significance and moving past them as quickly as possible. I began mapping the locations where elaborate underground architecture had been reported, looking for patterns in distribution and design. What emerged was a network of sophisticated construction that followed geometric principles across the entire metropolitan area. Not random placement, not organic development, but coordinated planning that suggested centralized authority, shared architectural standards, technical knowledge that operated at a scale we're told didn't exist during the supposed construction periods. The architectural elements themselves demonstrated capabilities that challenged conventional understanding of historical construction techniques. Stone blocks weighing multiple tons, positioned with precision that required advanced lifting equipment, measurement systems, quality control that we associate with modern engineering. Tunnel systems that followed calculated routes, taking into account soil conditions, water table management, load distribution principles that supposedly weren't formalized until much later. Underground chambers with acoustic properties, lighting considerations, ventilation systems that demonstrated understanding of environmental engineering. But perhaps most disturbing was the evidence of deliberate concealment. Not accidental burial through gradual urban development, but systematic covering of sophisticated architecture using techniques that suggested coordinated effort. Uniform fill materials, consistent burial depths, methodical obscuring of architectural elements that would have required significant labor and planning to accomplish. As if someone had made a conscious decision to hide this underground network and ensure it remained hidden. The question of when this concealment occurred led me to examine historical records from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This period showed dramatic changes in urban documentation practices, building codes, construction standards that coincided with the apparent burial of sophisticated underground architecture. New regulations that emphasize standardization, efficiency, cost-effectiveness over architectural sophistication. Administrative changes that centralize construction oversight, reduced documentation requirements for foundation work, streamlined approval processes that discourage detailed investigation of existing underground structures. These regulatory changes occurred during the same decades when reports of elaborate underground architecture began disappearing from public records. As if the administrative framework was deliberately modified to prevent discovery, documentation, or investigation of what lay beneath the developing city. The timing suggested coordination, intentional policy designed to obscure rather than reveal the sophisticated construction capabilities that had previously existed. I discovered that similar patterns appeared in other major cities across the continent. Urban centers that showed evidence of elaborate underground architecture, sophisticated tunnel networks, precisely engineered foundations that exceeded documented construction capabilities for their supposed construction periods. And in each case, the same administrative silence, the same reluctance to investigate, the same systematic concealment beneath narratives of gradual urban development and modern progress. The scope of this pattern suggested something far larger than local construction anomalies or isolated examples of forgotten craftsmanship. It pointed toward a widespread architectural system, knowledge framework, organizational capacity that operated across vast geographic areas before being systematically obscured from historical records. Something that built with precision we struggle to match today, then vanished from documented history so completely that we've been taught to ignore the physical evidence of its existence. Standing in yet another excavation site, watching workers carefully avoid documenting the elaborate stonework they'd uncovered, I realized I was witnessing the continuation of a process that had been ongoing for more than a century. The systematic erasure of evidence that challenged accepted narratives about technological progress, historical development, the capabilities of previous civilizations. Evidence that suggested our understanding of the past might be far more incomplete than we've been led to believe. The evidence beneath our streets tells a story we've been trained not to see. Sophisticated architecture buried at impossible depths, precision stonework that exceeds documented capabilities, coordinated planning across vast urban areas, and systematic administrative silence whenever these discoveries surface. The physical facts are undeniable. The question is what we choose to do with them. Every excavation reveals more of the same pattern. Elaborate underground chambers, tunnel networks, architectural elements that demonstrate knowledge systems we're told didn't exist. Yet instead of investigation, we get concealment. Instead of documentation, we get institutional amnesia. Instead of questions about what this means for our understanding of the past, we get instructions to fill it in and move on. I can't tell you definitively who built the sophisticated architecture beneath our cities. I can't explain how it was buried so systematically or why its existence has been minimized in official records. But I can tell you that ignoring it won't make it disappear. The stonework remains. The precision endures. The evidence waits beneath every street corner for someone willing to ask the uncomfortable questions. Perhaps that's the real test. Not whether we can solve the mystery, but whether we're brave enough to acknowledge it exists. Whether we trust our own eyes over comfortable narratives. Whether we're willing to consider that the story of human capability might be far more complex than we've been taught. The architecture beneath our feet is still there, still waiting, still challenging everything we think we know about who built our world and when.